LSU head basketball coach Will Wade spoke to reporters during a Zoom call on Thursday afternoon. Talked a lot about players, image and likeness coming out. Here was some from Wade talking about what he sees from some of the players now deciding to jump college basketball and head straight to the G League.
I think a lot of it depends on how this goes. You know, there's Jalen Green and Isaiah Todd, and then Knicks, I think, are the guys who have, declared to play with the G League team. I think a lot of it's going to depend on where they get drafted and how it goes. But there's different paths for everybody. I think certainly the G League will be an option for some guys and some kids, and it's not an option for others. So, we'll just have to see where it goes. I think a lot of it's just to see how the guys progress this year and then ultimately where they get drafted. If it doesn't work for them, then you'll probably see a lot more folks come to college.
More from Wade talking about the upcoming basketball season and how he feels it could go off.
I would say I'm optimistic, but I'm also realistic. We've had 2 head coaches conference calls. We've got another one early next week with our administration, and they've done a great job. Scott and Stephanie and Verge and the team has done a great job of keeping everybody informed. I think they're optimistic, and I think they feel a little bit about how I do about what's best for some of our student athletes, and a lot of our student athletes is we can serve them really, really well here with the nutrition center and the mental health aspect with Shelly and her team. There's just a lot of things that we can do better when we have our hands on them a little bit, but we got to do it safely. We got to have the testing capacity, which I think our athletic department has, taking temperatures and that sort of thing. But, I'm optimistic, but the reality is the virus and the health experts are going to control that timeline. And there's people a lot smarter than us that are going to figure all that out. But certainly I'm optimistic and hopeful that by November we can have a lot of answers that we don't have today that could get us closer to getting back on the court and playing.
Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner, jumped on a Jacksonville radio station yesterday on a Jacksonville radio show, XL Primetime, and talked about what he feels could be what he feels the fall could look like.
But if football's not an active part of our life in the fall, what's happening around us becomes a really big question, right? Societally, economically, culturally. But the essence of your question is that's the difficulty is you're dealing with a constant hypothetical. And the word if is embedded in every question. And we're trying to jump through those hoops, but it brings me back to kind of core focus point, which is we are preparing to play football Labor Day weekend as scheduled. Now, I don't know what will happen between now and then. That's going to guide us. We have a bit of an asset in time right now because there's a lot of learning, research, development, testing going on, and we're part of those conversations, and that's going to help us make that decision at an appropriate time.
New Orleans Saints, a phenomenal story if you haven't read it yet. The Athletic, Jeff Duncan did a phenomenal job of getting behind-the-scenes access and storytelling from Sean Payton, Jeff Ireland, and the draft from the New Orleans Saints and making a move to get Tommy Stevens in the 7th round. We'll talk a little bit more about the story coming up, but Mike Triplett was on ESPN talking about it, but also Tommy Stevens was on with Hester yesterday telling his draft day story.
Like I said, I thought that, talking to the Saints and the draft process was a good fit for me as well. But at the time, I thought that I was actually going to have a better fit at another place. And so, as polite and respectful as I could, I told Coach Payton, I was like, hey, I think that, my best situation might be going a different route. And so, Coach Payton says he's going to call me back. He gets off the phone. He calls me back again. And, he tells me that, he still thinks that this is the best situation for me. And, I call my agent. We talk it over a little bit with him. And shortly after that phone call, I get another call from another number that I didn't have or didn't recognize. But this time it was a New Orleans area code. And I answer it. It's the GM and Coach Payton both on the phone. And, Coach Payton said this, and I'll never forget it. He says, last time I called you, I was asking you to come to New Orleans, but this time I'm not giving you the choice. We're going to trade up in the draft, and we're going to take you.
I'm tired of asking. I'm taking. There's a lot of juicy details that we'll get into when we discuss this story that involve Joe Brady, Sean Payton. I think it speaks to the type of competitor that Payton is. Just a way more fascinating story than the drafting of Tommy Stevens has any right to be.
Right.
I mean,
The Joe Burrow era has begun in Cincinnati. Ben Baby will stop by here at 8 a.m. to talk a little bit about that. Andy Dalton's run with the Bengals is over as the veteran quarterback was released on Thursday. The move comes 1 week after Cincinnati drafted former LSU star QB Joe Burrow with the top overall pick. Burrow threw 60 touchdown passes in 2019, which stands as an FBS record. Won the Heisman Trophy as he led the Tigers to the national championship. In 9 years, Dalton had a 70, 61, and 2 record and led the Bengals to the postseason from 2011 through 2015 and was a 3-time Pro Bowl selection. NASCAR will return to action.
Andy Dalton made 3 Pro Bowls?
According to ESPN.com.
Damn. All right. Work out, Andy.
NASCAR will return to action at Darlington Raceway on May 17th, kicking off a packed 2-week schedule announced on Thursday. The 400-mile Cup Series event on May 17th will be the first of 7 events in 11 days involving all 3 NASCAR National Series. The revised schedule has a pair of Wednesday races. Those are your headlines. What's trending here on Off the Bench?